Okay. Well, it's showing the live show, but now it's not starting. Oh, there we go. It looks pretty good. Well, I'm going to send this to our texters right now. Okay. Oh, now we have. Um. Okay.
Buckeye Talk is live. How about
It
this?
is live. I'm gonna send it to you guys. Oh, did you wait? Did you get it? Hey, look at that.
We're live. It's on
I
YouTube.
know. Well, we're here now. If people want to come join in, they should join in. Come join in on the fun. This should be fun. Okay. So, how's everybody doing? How's everybody Saturday? Everybody good?
Ready to talk some football?
Ready to talk some football?
Ready to talk
How's
some
your
football
Saturday, Andrew?
live to talk some football.
Yeah, I know. Okay, well, let me do the professional thing here real quickly. Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, Stefan, Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. And we're live on YouTube. If you can't watch live, it's okay. This will get posted per usual through Spotify and Apple Music and all those things. But we're trying to evolve here. We're trying new things. Bear with us if it's not always perfect, but this is something we're going to be trying to do all off season in some different ways when newsier things happening. Because once we get into the season, we want to have some things perfected. And the only way you get perfect is reps, Stefan. And that's exactly what these quarterbacks got on Saturday and why Ryan Day talked about, hey, we came out here with kind of a pass-heavy look because we wanted to get the best possible look at all these guys. And it seems like for at least Julian Sayin this was the best offer he'd had to given us in the 3 times we saw the quarterbacks throw.
Yeah, no doubt. I thought Julian Sayin looked outstanding today. I'm sure we'll get into that a bit. But I think for just Ohio State's quarterback room as a whole, I think we've seen where this room has progressed in the spring. And I think this spring was kind of a conclusion of you got what you wanted from this, right? Like you wanted Julian Sayin to develop into a starter. You wanted Lincoln Keenholz to develop into a guy who can compete for the starting job, but also give you a valuable backup. You wanted Tavian St. Clair to just give you reps and kind of go through his first spring and learn, everything that comes with making that jump from high school football to college football. And I think Ohio State accomplished all of those things. There was probably a point early on in the spring where maybe we were a little dicey about what this room was going to look like. And I think we knew that there was going to be a bit of a learning curve, things that, have to happen over the course of spring, right? Ryan Day said that there's been good days and bad days and days in between for these quarterbacks. And I think right now for Ohio State, you end this spring feeling probably pretty confident about what you got. And you go into the fall camp telling yourself, all right, what's the next step now for these guys? What's next for Julian? What's next for Lincoln? What's next for Tavian as you get ready for that first game against Texas? Because everything's about to start moving 100 miles per hour at once.
So let's start with Julian. I also sent this survey out to our tech subscribers, 614-350-3315 if you want to sign up for that. We send surveys. We have a good time over there. Let's start with Julian Sayin and let's grade his spring performance. Ohio State did keep stats of the quarterbacks and the receivers and the running backs. That's kind of all you can do. You can't really do tackling and stuff like that. It's just a hard juncture to do. But Tavian St. Clair, 17 of 24, 175 yards, a touchdown. His longest throw was 36 yards. He also got sacked 3 different times. But for what this spring was supposed to be for Julian Sayin, was this what we saw on Saturday at the spring game? Probably the most ideal way for him to punctuate that, even if it wasn't always clean throughout the 15 practices.
I thought so. I think this was one of the things with Julian where, I said this in one of our post-game videos, like today I thought you saw maybe the one thing that you were looking for, and that was the word consistency from Julian. Like, there were moments today where you would say like, oh, wow, that was a really nice throw, or you know what, really solid throw, or you know what, hey, nice check down, or made the right read, just elements of an offense and elements of quarterback play where you look at it and you go, A+, and elements of quarterback player, you go, yeah, took what was there. Check down to the tight end. But there wasn't the moment, right? There wasn't the panic moment that you saw from Julian Sayin where you start to go, oh, that's not a great read, man. That's not something you can do. Like there weren't those moments, and I thought that was the most encouraging thing that I saw from Julian Sayin. That was why I gave him an A when we evaluated him and when we graded him, because there were moments, like you said. I don't think we have to lie to each other and say Julian was perfect all spring and this is crazy, but I can't believe that he's unbelievable and I can't believe he's this good. He did look good in spurts, but there were also moments that you saw some not so great moments, and I thought he kind of eliminated those today. And I thought he looked pretty good. And that to me was, I think, the biggest thing. And that was what you wanted to see. So yeah, I think it was the perfect way for him to kind of put the exclamation point on the spring, because Stefan mentioned it for the last like 2 weeks. There's been a lot of talk about, hey, is Lincoln Keenholz really pushing? Is he really making this a QB competition? And I think he did, but I think Julian today showed you a little bit of why his upside is higher and a little bit of that consistency.
So we did a video on this out on the field, Stefan, after the game, where I asked you guys to grade Julian based on the spring game, and then I broke the rules because listen, sometimes you break the rules, okay? It happens. So I do want to ask you what I essentially did myself. Our texters gave 57.5% of our texters gave Julian Sayin a B. 40% gave him an A. He got a couple percentages for a C, but that's it. No D's or F's. You're actually the only one here who I believe saw the quarterbacks all 3 times we got to see him in competitive settings. Andrew was a little sick. I had some other stuff going on Friday night. So you were the only one there at the Friday practice in Ohio Stadium before the spring game. We were all in there at the Student Appreciation Day practice. So wrap all that together. What's your grade for Julian Sayin?
Altogether, I'd probably give it a B, because I think you saw some bad, but you saw balance with good. And it's, you kind of graded on the curve just because what did you expect to see from Julian Sayin this spring, right? Highs and lows. That's what you expected. He's a guy who hasn't started yet. And I think we're going to see some of that during the season. I think there's going to be highs and lows against Texas and Ohio and Grambling. And when they play out at Washington, he's playing in a road environment. Like, I think that's all going to happen. You kind of just saw it encapsulated into the spring. But overall, I give him a B just because you see the talent. It's evident when the ball comes out of his hand. He's really good throwing over the middle of the field, which is not always easy to do when you're a young quarterback, right? There's a lot of risk that comes with that. You got to be kind of precise, and he has been that. He had a pass down the seam for a touchdown to Max Clare in the spring game. He had a pass over the middle of the field. I believe it was to Mylan Graham in the student appreciation practice. That was really impressive. So the highs are exactly what we thought they were going to be. And there was never I don't know, even in the lows, the bad moments that we saw, like he had a couple turnovers in that Friday practice, which wasn't great. It was kind of this, they were working on options and he had a couple fumbles or whatever it was. But overall, the bad that we saw on the student appreciation day was like a half second late on a pass, or maybe just indecisive, not quick enough with his decisions and all that kind of stuff. It's like, I mean, yeah, when you haven't played competitive reps, that's just what's going to happen. Ryan Day has really emphasized this point, and I think it's something that we don't think about all the times when we're talking about football. The example you use is like in other sports, like baseball, they play 6 games a week. If you're talking about MLB, and even college baseball, they're playing 4 or 5 games over the course of a week. Basketball, you're playing 2 games during the course of a week. Like, there's a lot of games to be played. In football, Ohio State just played 16 regular season games, and that was record breaking for how long the season was, right? And you add on top of that, I mean, how many reps did Julian Sayin get? Not a ton. And how many of them were competitive? None of them. Even Devin Brown, I mean, he only saw a handful of competitive reps as the backup quarterback. Will Howard was this team starter throughout the season outside of a few hiccups and injuries. So Julian Sayin's going into this with very little 11 on 11 experience, right? Because you leave high school, there's a ton of 7-on-7 stuff that goes on. But once you leave high school, you're not going to see a ton of 11 on 11 reps without these scrimmages and spring games and whatnot. So there's going to be highs and lows just because he hasn't had a lot of these 11 on 11 opportunities since he got to college football. And that's what you're going to see in these student appreciation days and these scrimmages is the highs and lows because it's still relatively new to him at this level. But I think when you see walk away from the spring game, you tell yourself, okay, the bad is going to wrinkle itself out, but he's not becoming more timid because he's making mistakes. He's not hesitating more because he's making mistakes. He's just learning to be quicker and progress quicker and make plays quicker. And that's all going to happen over the course of time. And the spring game tells me you should probably feel pretty confident about what Julian's saying and Lincoln Keenholz, for that matter, bring to this quarterback room.
Well, just to add in real quick, like Steven, I'll let you talk about this with CJ, but you were talking about CJ Stroud was really good thrown over the middle. And I think that was something really encouraging that we saw today where, you look at Julian Sayin like that throw to Max Clare down the seam for a touchdown.
Yeah.
That I thought was a really nice throw. Him throwing over the middle opens up this offense in a way that it needs to be opened because Jeremiah Smith's going to win on the outside. Breaking news, everybody. Jeremiah Smith is going to beat somebody one-on-one. Jeremiah Smith might beat somebody one-on-two. That's just going to happen. Carnell Tate's going to beat a lot of people one-on-one. Brandon Ennis is going to beat a lot of people one-on-one. But when you have somebody that can layer the ball in that kind of soft spot between the safeties and the linebackers, which, again, is a very, very tough thing to do, that allows you the option and it allows you the freedom to have your receivers kind of own the outsides and say, our quarterback doesn't need to be perfect outside the numbers. Those are the toughest throws to make, those back shoulder throws, those deep out routes. Those are very, very difficult. But when you've got the monsters at receiver, like I'm looking at some of the comments that are rolling in. Somebody noted Jake Butt said on the broadcast, obviously we didn't watch it, but that the wide receiver room is an embarrassment of riches. Yeah, it's right. Well, when you have that embarrassment of riches, you can trust your guys to go make more plays than their guys. Today, it just so happened to be your guys versus your guys. But it's when you have that ability to throw the ball over the middle of the field and do that type of quarterbacking and play that type of way, man, like that it allows you so many different options to that offense. And I think that was one of the things from Julian that as we evaluate him, that is one of, I think, maybe the big subcategories to why I think people were impressed about him today.
Yeah, man, those Southern California quarterbacks, man, they know how to throw the ball over the middle. I think, and I was saying this to people up in the press box after halftime of that game, because the second half kind of went quickly. The third quarter was a normal quarter, and they went running clock in the fourth quarter. The spring game's a lot quicker. It used to be more competitive than that. They used to have drafted teams, and the losing team had to walk back to the Woody, which it's a quick drive. It's not as quick of a walk. They also used to make them remulch Buckeye Grove. It used to, it's just not that anymore. It's essentially turned into what the Hall of Fame game is for the NFL, where maybe you see the superstars, but really it's just let's get out of here healthy. I wish we could have saw CJ Stroud in the spring of 21 more. We were still coming off of COVID, right? And so the spring game was really everybody's first true window to seeing CJ Stroud, and he handled it so well that he essentially used that spring game to go, okay, if you thought CJ Stroud was going to be the starting quarterback, which was like 95% of us, then you left that game going, yeah, this is about what I thought it was going to be. I do feel like Julian Sayin used the 2025 spring game kind of the same way. Lincoln Keenholz, 12 of 18, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a long of 51, which I think was Mylan Graham's touchdown catch. Second of all, Mylan Graham, my stock. Taven St. Clair, 11 for 15. He had 2 touchdowns, 116 yards. No, excuse me, 11 for 15. 11 to 15 with 2 interceptions, 116 yards, and 1 touchdown, one of which is picks. Fahim Delane kind of fooled him and jumped the route and ended up being a pick 6. Taven St. Clair, Ryan David said it. He's just so far behind because he's a true freshman still learning this that he's not a part of the conversation, but I did see some good things from him. Stefan, I think Lincoln and Julian both accomplished what their spring missions were. Julian got to the end of it and punctuated it in a way where people can feel like if he's the starting quarterback you thought he was going to be this year, if he's going to be the starter, you left Ohio Stadium or you turned off Big Ten Network today and went, yeah, that validated it for me. But Lincoln Keenholz had enough good practices that we saw, and we saw enough good things from him to where Ryan Day can't just hand this job to Julian Sayin. Lincoln Keenholz is going to make sure that whoever wins the battle had to earn it. And for the sake of the quarterback room, that's the best case scenario for what Ryan Day could have gotten out of the spring when he was never going to name a quarterback after Saturday.
Yeah, and I think it's the development of Lincoln Keenholz is maybe some of the most important on this roster, right? Like you always knew he was going to be a developmental piece when he came in, and I think a lot of people sold their stock after that 2023 Cotton Bowl simply
Yeah.
because it didn't look good, right? And I think we said this on a pod earlier this spring of just you kind of have to throw that game out of your memory. Think about Lincoln Keenholz as someone who hasn't played at all at Ohio State, and now he's entering his junior year. He's had 2 years with Ryan Day, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Steven, this is only his second spring at Ohio State because he came in
Yeah,
later,
it is.
right? So it's like he hasn't had a ton of time around. I mean, this is Julian Sayin's second spring with Ohio State, so it's like that kind of puts into perspective just relatively how little Lincoln Keenholz has experience of being around college football, right? It's still relatively new to him, so his development is huge. I think his development's also interesting because it's kind of different than a lot of quarterbacks we've seen from Ryan Day, right? Like we've seen highly rated guys come in, and we see with Julian Sayin it was similar with CJ Stroud, and there's elements to Justin Fields that's maybe similar to Julian Sayin because you got this guy from the portal, and we saw him taking a portal guy like Will Howard, and it's a 1 year deal, and you come in and you make him an NFL quarterback, and he's done everything with a lot of quarterbacks. Lincoln's kind of the first one where it's genuinely a guy who was not highly rated and you really had to develop him. And now here he is in this role where, if nothing else, he can give you that Devin Brown, level of production behind the scenes and maybe even games. Like you want Lincoln Keenholz to be a guy that in the second half against Grambling can play the entire, half for you or, play most of it and maybe Tavian St. Clair get some reps. You want Lincoln Keenholz to be a guy where, oh man, Julian Sayin at Michigan State is out for a snap. Okay, he's going to come in and manage this game and get you a big touchdown. Or, you lose Will Howard a little bit in that Michigan game. Okay, Devin Brown can step in and continue that drive, and you're not going to completely stall. You don't have to throw out the playbook because a different guy came in at quarterback. Lincoln has had one of the most important developments for this team. Him at least making this somewhat of a competition as late as Student Appreciation Day or as late as Friday's practice that I got to see, like that was so important for Ohio State to have. We talked about it when we previewed the quarterback room, Stephen, going into this spring of what is an objective for this team or a question that you have about this position. Can Lincoln Keenholz make it a genuine competition? And it still feels like Julian Sayin is the favorite to start. I think he's going to start. All three of us think he's going to start. But Lincoln Keenholz has done enough this spring to show you that not only do you have a quality backup, not only is he ready if needed to play college football on a big stage, but also he's given you somewhat of a competition to where Julian Sayin isn't marching through the spring saying, oh, I don't got anything to worry about. Whether I perform great or not, I got a starting job. He's had to compete every day. That's what you wanted from Lincoln Keenholz this spring.
So I asked our texters this question, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. It's a good time. It's a good time to sign up now, too, because it's about to be recruiting season, so there's plenty of going on. There's not a bad time to sign up for the text messages. I'm just telling you why right now is a good time, even though there's not going to be any football for a couple of weeks here. I asked our texters about the QB play in general. I didn't want to make it about one quarterback because things happen, right? Devin Brown had to come in against Michigan State last year to close out a half, and he throws a touchdown pass to Jeremiah Smith. When if they didn't have confidence in him at that point, they probably would have just ran the clock out. But it ended up sealing the game if you think about it. Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being zero confidence whatsoever. Andrew, coming out of the spring, 15 practices. We got to see 2 of those practices where they were doing competitive stuff, 2 practices where they were doing a lot of install stuff. And then there's a spring game and thrown into that. What's your overall confidence level in the quarterback play headed into the summer for 2025?
I'm at like a 7, I think.
Okay.
I think that's probably about where the textures are because I think I think there's 2 things. I think you're optimistic. So you're not at like a 5 where it's like, it could go either way. I'm
Right.
I'm optimistic about what this room can be and what this room can do. But we also haven't seen it yet. And I think today, like Stefan had a good point where, you could talk about, 7-on-7 and, these type of things that can help you get ready. And then you start to talk about, okay, well, what is Julian Sayin actually looking at in practice? And you're not looking at a ton of live reps, and this is kind of one of the big moments for that. So I don't know if it'd be fair to be at a 10, but I'm optimistic about this room in general because I think the upside is there. I think Lincoln Keenholz, like you said, is kind of giving you enough to where you can say, you know what? If we have to put a backup quarterback in this year, we're not in trouble. Like the season's not over. Like it's not DEFCON whatever. Like this is not a disaster. So yeah, the offense I think will be fine if they have to put in a quarterback. And I think having a developmental 5-star is obviously great. So yeah, I'm at a 7, and the more I talk, I'm maybe even convincing myself I should be at an 8 about how good this quarterback room could be. But I think you have to be more towards 10 than you are towards 5 or 4 or anything like that. I think so. I'm going to change my answer. Actually, I'm at an 8. I think I'm changing it. I talked myself into it. I talked myself into feeling better about this room because you lay it out and you say, okay, well, what is there really to feel bad about? And I think experience is a fair thing to bring up and say, well, these quarterbacks haven't really done it, but you see the upside. So yeah, I'm in an 8 out of 10.
It feels like you tried to be safe about it, and then you were like, "Wait,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
good."
I tried to come out and be like, you know what? Let me give a reasoned, rational, fair take about this. And one of the commenters, Doug Shepard, said, Lincoln's already better than what plenty of teams have, and he's 100% right. Like think about how many teams in college football Lincoln Keenholz is starting for right now. So yeah, I'm in an 8.
Nayland North.
Yeah, Steve and I had the same thought at the same time there. I think there's a
Lincoln
certain
Keenholz,
school that likes to claim
volunteer.
Ohio Stadium.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll touch on Nico for a second, but first let's finish this up. Stefan, what are you?
I'm probably at a 7. Frankly, I was a 7 coming into the spring game. And
Yeah.
Steven, it's funny, we had this conversation of like, okay, if the quarterbacks don't look good, we have to remember we've only seen 3 open practices. Like they're going through it in the spring, like they'll be fine. And I was probably at a 7 coming into it. I'm not letting myself change because they played well. We said if they played bad, we weren't going to change our opinion too much. But then they played well. We were like, well, we could change our opinion now. I'm still at a 7. I mean, listen, Julian Sayin still has room to grow. Lincoln Keenholz still has room to grow. Like there's still strides that have to be made. I'm not like you can't walk out of the spring game and say Julian played great. Like 100%, he's going to dominate against Texas. Like, that's it's a big step. It's a big first game. So I keep at a 7. I think he's going to be good, but he's going to be tested right away.
Our Texas overall score was 7.36. 37%. We're at an 8. 26%. We're at a 7. 15 at a 9. That was essentially where the 7 to 9 was where the crux of all this was. I'm at a 9. Here's why I'm at a 9, though. Some of it has to do with the way Julian played today, but some of this also has to do with we have seen some quarterbacks not have great spring games. I don't know if you guys can hear outside. It's nice outside, so people are enjoying the nice weather while we're in here screaming at microphones. It happens. If you've been around Buckeye Talk for a while, I used to live downtown, and people would rev their engines every time they passed by my house, so this isn't even the worst of it. But here's some quarterback numbers. Those are the quarterback numbers.
That's what you heard is Steven's optimism for the quarterback position, a revving engine.
Bingo. But okay, so since 2018, all the quarterback battles that they've had since Ryan Day's been here, both as an assistant coach and as the head coach, Dwayne Haskins was 9 of 19 for 120. That same day, Joe Burrow was 15 of 22 for 238 and 2 touchdowns. Pretty quality day. He also left in with the LSU. But then also Tate Martell that day was 5 for 16 for 28 yards. You throw him in there as well. In 2019, they bring in Justin Fields as a transfer from Georgia. He's 4 for 13 for 131 yards and a touchdown. And 98 of those yards came on a touchdown pass to Benjamin Victor, where Ben Victor essentially did all the work. So very ugly day for Justin Fields. Granted, the quarterbacks weren't live. So the best thing about Justin Fields, we didn't get to see that day, and that's because of his legs. He had 1 rushing touchdown. Matthew Baldwin, who ended up transferring to TCU before he medically retired, was 20 of 36 for 246, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Then you get to 2021. CJ was 16 of 22 for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. Essentially a good enough day to where the entire general public left that day going, yep, number 7 is the starting quarterback. We'll see you in August. But Kyle McCord had a pretty quality day. He had a big-time throw to Garrett Wilson in that game. CJ had one to Chris Olave. McCord was 12 of 17 for 184 and 2 touchdowns. Jack Miller was 17 of 30 for 128 and an interception. In 2023, when it's Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, Brown had a finger injury, so he ended up not playing in that game. So Kyle McCord got a lot of reps, 18 of 34 for 184 and a touchdown. So okay day. But I remember us going into that game thinking, Devin's not playing. Kyle, you got a chance to make a statement, and he really didn't make a statement. And then last year, Will Howard, 9 of 13 for 77 yards. Devin Brown, 5 of 7 for 66 yards and a touchdown. Julian Sayin, 10 for 17 for 85 yards. He also threw a pick six. So 5-star quarterbacks throwing a pick six to freshman DBs. That run continues because Davian St. Clair had one this year. Lincoln Keenholz was 10 of 17 for 71 yards and two interceptions. And then Aaron Nolan, 5 for 7, 47 yards and interception. So for the most part, the quarterbacks at Ohio State that we presumed would be the starters, not named CJ Stroud, were either pedestrian at best or probably made you worried about what was happening. And what did Justin Fields turn into? Right? What did Will Howard turn into? So it ended up being fine. So the fact that Julian Sayin came into this environment and didn't shy away, the fact that Lincoln Keenholz flashed some good things, I think that's a good thing. Now, does it mean that Julian Sayin is going to go be a Heisman Trophy finalist and all the things? I don't know. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't. But I do think it was a good next step for this room, and I agree with you guys. Good for Lincoln Keenholz and Julian Sayin. I think they handled the spring the way I think that was best case scenario for them. Okay.
Yeah, I will say, let me add this too real quick on Julian. I think there was, you mentioned it there briefly, there's a benefit to him playing in this environment too. Like Ryan Day said that he's met with the quarterbacks basically every day of the spring. Some of the conversation is going over the good and bad of practice. A lot of the conversation is just like, hey, this is life as a quarterback at Ohio State. You can't lose games. You got to do this. You got to do that. Like it's really hard to do, but you know, the rewards are endless, I believe were his words. And you know, playing in that environment is part of it, right? Like everyone's watching you if you're Julian Sayin, wanting you to play like the starting quarterback. And if you don't, there's going to be a lot of criticism. And if you do, there's going to be a lot of praise. So I know we got a comment here on YouTube asking us, what do we think of the atmosphere? I mean, it was fine. I'd probably say like 80% of the lower bowl was filled up. There was a few people trickling in the upper bowl, right? Like it wasn't a packed house, but you could hear like when the 2024 team got their rings, it got kind of loud in there. When Bo Jackson broke a few runs or Mylan Graham had his touchdown, you know, it got kind of loud in there. So I think it wasn't like, you know, there was nowhere close to the playoff environment that Nico Iamaleava had to deal with at Ohio Stadium, but it was, you know, an environment where you're at least putting, you know, a guy like Julian Sayin, a guy like Lincoln Keenholz into the test and trying to see how they respond.
I thought it was like 40,000 people there. I thought the number might be a little bit higher just because you're coming off a natty. They're debuting the rings and stuff. Maybe there'll be more people. It's a nice day outside, but again, it's a spring game. So I'm not going to sit here and chastise the fans for only 40,000 people because I guarantee you that bad boy is going to be full once August 30 rolls around. Okay, here's my only Nico Iamaleava question. Because I did ask our texters flat out, do you think OSU should reach out to Nico? And I only asked because I ask because you have to ask, right? Do you do your due diligence? Because
I wish you had asked before the spring game and then again after the spring game.
I know. I thought about it. 94% of our texters said no, and people were even texting, what are you talking about, dude? No, why would you bring that in here? We don't want to deal with that. But using Nico as the face of this. Stefan, you were there Friday, and you were like, it looked great. It was ugly. Lincoln threw a bad pick. Julian's fumbling handoffs, right? Julian and the Student Appreciation Day wasn't great. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't great. Lincoln had the best day, but I think even that ceiling maybe had a tail into it. Is there a world where we are coming on this pod, and if it looked like today, what it looked like on Friday and last Saturday, where we're not sitting here joking about it and being flippant about it, we're genuinely talking about, should Ohio State explore the portal? Or was there enough there that regardless of what happened right now, you would have still felt confident that this was going to get where it needed to go?
Yeah, I would not have gone after Nico if you had asked me, you know, last week.
Okay.
No, Ryan Day, I think, is too good with quarterbacks for us to, scramble and say no, or scramble and say you need help. You can't trust
Yeah.
Julian Sayin. Like Ryan Day is going to develop Julian Sayin.
Yeah.
What's the worst quarterback play Ryan Day has put on the field? Kyle McCord?
Who was third team All Big Ten.
Correct. And went 11-1. And in
Yeah.
the 12-team college football playoff era, who knows what could have happened, right?
Right.
Again, Marv could have gone Jeremiah Smith mode, and we're talking about
I
that
don't know
team
if
winning
that
a
could
natty
have.
as
I
well.
think he would have gone Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah. So it's like, but that's like, I was not freaking out in that sense. I was more so looking at that competition, saying, okay, Julian's progression is maybe going a little bit slower than I thought.
Yeah.
But there was never a point where I was thinking this guy isn't going to be a great option. Listen, could he struggle against Texas and lose? Sure. But I'm very confident that he's going to be a good enough quarterback this year where at the worst, this team goes 10-2 and makes the playoff. Or goes 10-2 and is in the fringe of the playoff and doesn't get in somehow. I don't think bringing in Nico would have elevated that a ton. Maybe you would have had a better chance on August 30th if you have Nico than Julian, just because Nico's got experience. But by the end of the season, I think Julian Sayin is going to be a better quarterback than Nico Iamaleava. And I think Julian Sayin is going to be maybe the best quarterback in college football returning for the 2026 season, assuming he stays put at Ohio State. So I think Julian Sayin is going to be a better quarterback than Nico. So I'll sacrifice week 1 against Texas if it means that weeks 7 through 13, I'm feeling pretty good.
So 2021, where CJ loses to Oregon early.
Yep.
But by the time we get to the Penn State game, it's like, no, this is one of the best players in college football. Okay.
The parallels, you've mentioned it so many times, the parallels between this team and the 21 team are so stark. You just notice them right away. The same goes for these quarterbacks. And you always say this. Our columnist Jimmy Watkins, he decided to get into an argument with Steven today. I knew exactly what Steven was going to say. Is Jimmy was kind of iffy about the quarterbacks, and he was like, "This doesn't look like CJ Stroud." To which Steven said, "April 2021, CJ Stroud did not look like the NFL Rookie of the Year."
No, and that's the key. You cannot compare any of these quarterbacks to a version of a quarterback when they're not at that stage in their development yet. You have to say, okay, well, we're recording this live on April 12th. Okay, where was CJ Stroud on April 12th? Where was Justin Fields on April 12th? Because to compare them to CJ Stroud December 31st, 2022, that's not fair because nobody was CJ Stroud December 31st, 2022, which is why he was the number 2 pick in the NFL draft.
Where was Will Howard in April? A guy who had 4 years of college football experience. He came to Ohio State. It was a new thing. He still had to learn.
Right. So I like the parallels, though. Let's say this, Andrew, though. I agree with Stefan. They don't need to explore Nico, and I don't think I would have been saying that even if they had looked bad today. But I do think in the name of covering your bases, it would have been fair that if you're talking to people within the program, just working the beat, if you would have heard, no, we're not bringing Nico in, but we at least made the call to do our due diligence. Had things not looked great, would it have been fine? You don't do it. You don't actually go through the plan. But just to cover all your bases, Brian Day at least looks out there to see what's there. And not just for an experienced guy as an older guy in the room, but someone where things don't look great. Let's just make sure for the sake of making sure. Is that fair?
I don't think so still. Because, I mean, you would have basically needed to say, if he comes in, we might be trading him for Julian or him for
Probably.
Lincoln.
Probably.
So, I think Ohio State has what they need at quarterback in the top 2. Now, there is a different quarterback conversation out of the portal where is it worth it to go get a 4th-year kind of veteran backup for this room? And that, I think, is maybe your due diligence. But Nico very much feels like a guy who's looking to go someplace and then go pro. So I just don't think timeline-wise it fit. I don't think it at all fit unless you were really, really worried about what you had, and I don't think they are.
I mean, there's a culture aspect to this too.
Yes.
We're not talking about, just the best quarterback in the portal.
Yeah.
Josh Heupel just had a quote basically saying that they decided Nico wasn't going to come back the moment he decided to no show at practice. And then he also had a quote essentially saying that whether he's talking about the coach or whether he's talking about a player, no one's bigger than the power T. Well, guess who also has a block O that they don't let anyone be bigger than?
The Brotherhood.
Yeah. So it's
No.
like, I mean, is that even a culture? Like, I don't think there was ever going to be anything with that. And also, what were your expectations? Like this is a hypothetical where Ryan Day reaches out to at least test the waters on Nico, right? This is the hypothetical for those just now joining the live show. Like, I would ask Ryan Day, what were you expecting from Julian this spring? If it got to this point and it's still kind of shaky, that you're immediately going to look for another option, then your expectations weren't reasonable. My expectations for Julian were for there to be highs and there to be lows. But by the time you get to the regular season, he's looking pretty good. So it's like if he struggles in a couple practices, you're like, emergency button, go get Nico. Well, were you saying Julian's going to look like 2019 Joe Burrow in the spring? Like, was that your expectation? Because that was never going to happen then.
There's a base floor level of expectation. And there's no reason to think that these quarterbacks didn't hit that base level of expectation. So Tristan Gebbia, they need to go find a guy like that where Tristan wasn't coming here to start. This is the guy that's probably trying to get his coaching career off the ground while also use his last year of eligibility. He got a chance to do that here. I'm sure they'll probably be exploring options like that this spring. Okay, that's the quarterback conversation. Let's transition to this. One hot take from you, Stefan, coming out of the spring.
One hot take. Well, I mean, outside of Arvell Reese being an All-American linebacker.
No. We're putting the pin in Arvell Reese until the fall, because then I'm going to let you rev your engine all you want.
The hot take, I worry that it's not spicy enough, but I think this O-line is going to be better than last year's O-line. Like, fully healthy last year's O-line. Let's say it's Josh Simmons, Donovan Jackson, Seth McLaughlin, Tegra Shabola, and Josh Fryer. That's the offensive line I'm using as the basis for this conversation, even though we saw like that group together for 4 games maybe. But let's say that's the best combination. I think this year's unit is going to be better. I think they got, left tackle Ethan Yawanyawa. There's going to be some work to do there, right? There's still some progress. He had to transform his body this spring. Like doing that and also learning a new offense and playing against better competition, that's going to come with some growing pains. I think he's going to end up being fine at left tackle. I think at left guard, I left last season thinking Luke Montgomery is 100% this team starting left guard, all Big Ten caliber player. This spring solidified that for me. Carson Hinsman, I feel good about. The time that he got behind Seth McLaughlin, man, has that made him a better player. He looks great out there. Whatever happens at right guard, I think right now I'd probably still pencil in Tegra Shabola. We'll see what ends up happening there. And I think Austin Servo is this team starting right tackle, and I feel great about what he's doing at right tackle. That unit with Tyler Bowen, it's going to be good, man. And now you've got depth, too, that it's ironic to say because last year's team, the offensive line got beaten to death with injuries, and their depth got tested, and they ended up surviving it. And I still didn't feel like the depth was that great last year. I don't feel that way this year. I think they got 4 pretty good options at tackle with Daniels, Onyawa, Sierveld, and Ian Moore. And Cardillo, I don't think is that far away. He's kind of in that. It's the same thing. The quarterbacks have separated themselves where Tavian St. Clair is still a true freshman. Like Cardillo is in that boat. Like you can tell the difference. But I think by the end of the year, if he had to get thrown in, it wouldn't be, worst case scenario. On the interior, you got so much depth. Like the reason I iffy about the Tegra Shabola thing is I think Tegra can be good. I think you need to see it more consistently. But if Ohio State decided that Josh Padilla is ready to go, I don't hate the idea of Padilla starting as center and Hinsman being one of your guards with Luke Montgomery as the other guard. Like there's so many options at guard. And now we're talking about, Padilla being another potential option at center. Like you are too deep, I think, at every position on the offensive line. Gabe Van Sickle's looking good. The Armstrong twins the Armstrong brothers are looking good. Like there's a lot of depth in this room to the point where I think it's going to be better than last year's offensive line. And that was a really good unit. I think this year's unit is going to be even better.
Andrew, I love the way Ryan talked about the tackles because I think we knew the depth at the interior was there just simply because of how they've recruited the interior
Sure.
of the offensive line, the way it's developed, and the fact that so many injuries forced Luke Montgomery to play meaningful snaps in the playoff, Austin Sarabelle to play meaningful snaps in the playoff, Tegra Shabola and Carson Hinsman all played meaningful snaps in the playoff. We think Austin Sarabelle might have a chance to be the best offensive lineman this year, and I think he's going to be a starting right tackle. Ethan Onyawa loses his black stripe during what was essentially their last truly competitive practice on Tuesday of this week. Ryan said that they feel like they're going to have 4 eventually. He talked about him with optimism, which is not the way he talked about some other position groups that, of course, we can get into here. But they might have a strong 2 deep plus a top 100 recruit as a true freshman, where next spring we're like, okay, Carter, you ready to be this team starting left tackle. And I know that's down the road, but they've got 4 tackles, which is a ways away from where they were last year, where it was like, oh no, Joshua Simmons got hurt and Sin Maholski's just not going to get it done. Now we have to play our left guard at left tackle.
Yeah, like I said, when we talked about this 2024 team, we were like, oh my goodness, look at how deep they are at corner and at receiver and even a quarterback. It's Devin Brown, and at running back, and we go down the line. We kind of got to the point where in the offseason where we were picking nits, and we were like, if there's an Achilles heel to this team, it's if one of your tackles goes down. And that happened. And when we watched them play against Nebraska, Zen Maholski didn't look all that good. And it was one of those things where we were in the press box kind of debating, is Zen Maholski even going to start next week before he got hurt? Right? Like, is Zen Maholski going to play against Penn State even if he's healthy? Like, and obviously he got hurt late in that game, and they moved some stuff around, but that was the place we were at. You're not there this year. So my hot take is kind of similar. Ohio State's going to have a top 10 rushing offense in college football. And I mean that by yards per carry. I think they were 29th last year. They were at 4.99 yards per carry. 10th last year was Liberty at 5.55. The running back talent is not as good. Let's just call it what it is. I think Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins were the best. They were the best running back tandem in the sport. And they were probably anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe 2 to 5 in the sport in terms of, like, if you were to say, let's rank the best X running backs in the sport, you maybe 2 to 6. Like, Genty's up there. You have the running backs this year that are up there. Caleb Johnson, Omarion Hampton, the Penn State kids, Notre Dame's Jeremiah Love. Like, there were a lot of really good running backs. But Ohio State's guys were just right up there. So the running back talent, I don't think it's crazy to suggest, look, they're not going to be as talented as they were in 2024 when you had a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher coming from the SEC and you had a 4th-year Travion Henderson coming back. But that doesn't mean I'm down on the running backs. I could think Bo Jackson is going to be a really, really good 3rd. I think CJ Donaldson can be a really solid change of pace 2nd. And then James Peoples, I think, is going to be really, really good. So I think the running game is going to be really, really good. And I think it kind of plays off of one another. I think the running game is not going to fall off to a level that is catastrophic or anything like that. I think the running game is still going to be pretty good. And the running back talent is still going to be pretty good. Then you pair that with the fact, okay, well, this offensive line is probably going to be really, really good. And this offensive line is going to be probably better than it was maybe even a year ago, especially during maybe that playoff run. They're certainly going to be deeper. Like, there's certainly going to not be as many issues if you lose a guard, you lose a center, you lose a tackle. There's not going to be this existential crisis that happens along the offensive line like there was. Now, sounds hilarious in hindsight because Donovan Jackson came in and did a pretty flipping good job playing left tackle. So it does kind of sound funny when you talk about it this way, but this offensive line and this running back group, I think they're going to be really good. And I think Ohio State can absolutely find its way into the top 10 of that yards per carry. So, you're obviously, in terms of attempts per game or yards per game, you're not going to outrush like Navy or Army or Notre Dame or maybe even like Michigan, teams that are just built to say, yeah, man, we're going to run it every play and we're only going to throw it when we have to. Like, you're not going to beat those teams in terms of total, in terms of like, composite stats. But I think in yards per carry, Ohio State's absolutely going to be up there. So yeah, that's my hot take. I have seen enough from the offensive line, and I feel confident enough in the way that Carlos Loughlin is coaching this running back room to say they're going to be one of the best rushing teams in the country.
They really like Bo Jackson.
And listen, you all should too. The people that are listening to this either later or the people that are watching this live, you all should too, because Bo Jackson should be very, very good.
I agree with everything said about the offensive line. My hot take is maybe it's spicy. I guess we'll see after I say it. Ohio State should run a 3-4 in 2025. I'm looking, and we'll see. The transfer portal opens on Wednesday, I think, right, Stefan? Tuesday or Wednesday, one of those 2 days next week.
Sounds right, yeah.
Okay. We'll see who ends up going in the portal. But right now, I'm looking at the options at defensive tackle. They're not great, right? Because there's people in the portal, obviously, but are they Ohio State caliber? And defensive tackle depth has been a question all spring. The spring game didn't solve that question. In fact, Ryan Day felt like there was a lot of knockback, and he said they were going to have to look at it. I think they're going to add people in the spring transfer portal in the defensive tackle. But even then, I don't know if they're going to have the necessary depth to be at the caliber that we've seen from the defensive tackle play over the last couple of years with Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, and you can even throw Mike Hall into that mix with what he was doing in 22 and 23 before he went pro. But what you do have is, I think they have 4 linebackers they 100% believe in at this point, and that's Sonny Styles. It's not 4, 3. Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, and Peyton Pierce. But every time Arvell Reese's name comes up, Matt Patricia gets all giddy and thinks about the million different ways you can use him. CJ Hicks is a linebacker who has been turned into a defensive end, who I think is just more of a hybrid outside linebacker, get after the pass rusher. So why should you play a 3-4? Because I think it mitigates your lack of depth on the interior while maximizing what the top of the room is with Edric Houston and Caden McDonald, while also having Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry. What if those are the 4 guys who have their hands down? They love Logan George. Ryan Day was talking highly about him and needing a chance to use him. And it feels like from the way they're talking, he has adjusted to moving up significantly in terms of level of play after transferring very, very well. So that's another option at defensive end. But what if your starting unit looks like this up front? Your traditional linebackers are Sonny Styles and Peyton Pierce. Your outside linebackers, edge guys, are CJ Hicks and Arvell Reese. And then your traditional down defensive linemen or whatever combination of Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, Edric Houston, and Caden McDonald. I don't know. That doesn't sound crazy to me, especially with Matt Patricia being the defensive coordinator who has run every possible defensive scheme over the past 25 years you can think of and won a Super Bowl doing it.
So it's not crazy, because I think, honestly, that might be Edric Houston's best role. Like, if you were to put him in a 5 and like a 3-4 over a tackle, like where he's covered up by another edge rusher, but he can kind of play in that role, I think that's going to be really like a really, really nice position for him. Might be the same with Jason Moore. I think that definitely should be under consideration for Ohio State, kind of changing to that 3-man front. I think if that's the case, 2 things need to happen. You need to get, obviously, more defensive tackle depth. We have talked about that, whether they stay in the 4, whether they go to a 3-man front, you need more defensive tackle depth. Now, I think you need a bigger body and as well. I think that maybe puts a premium on going to get a big body to kind of back up Cade McDonald, because I think Cade McDonald can do pretty much anything you need him to do in the middle of that interior defensive line. So I think getting a true nose as a backup for him would be imperative. I think that would open up the linebacker market a little bit, because if, like, James Laurinaitis came into this spring and said, we have 3, we're looking for 4. And the 3 what he was talking about were Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, and Peyton Pierce. Well, if you're going to start all 3 of those guys okay, how good do you feel about your 4, your 5, and maybe your 6? Like, basically, do you feel comfortable in Garrett Stover, who did not play today during the spring game, and TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn? Are those guys that you're comfortable in your 2 deep? Do you want to go get maybe a more experienced player who has played a little bit of college football? So if you need to bring Riley Pettijohn and TJ Alford and maybe even Garrett Stover along a little bit more slowly, you can do that. I think it definitely adds a point of emphasis for Ohio State to add when you talk about the front seven, specifically at tackle and at linebacker, probably an inside linebacker more than outside linebacker in that scheme. But it's 100% an option because you start to map out some of the body types on this team. CJ Hicks and Arvell Reese just might be that. Cade McDonald just might be that. Edric Houston just might be that. You might be led by your linebackers, so putting Sonny and Peyton Pierce together in the middle of that defense might be this team's best option. So that to me is an important point of emphasis too, because where do you put Kenyatta? Where do you put Caden? Like there are other considerations here, but this unit and this defense might be led in the front by its linebackers, and it probably should be and will be. So if that's the case, get them on the field. Put your best players on the field, and that might be the unit to do it. So I don't think what Steven's saying is crazy. I think that's, a potential hot take, but I don't think it's necessarily that outlandish.
I think the way we talked about Josh Simmons last year, and we ended up being wrong because Donovan Jackson is just that good, where we said if Josh Simmons goes down, like that's something this team cannot afford. This team cannot afford anything to happen to Katie McDonald or Edric Houston. Like I wrote in my notes on Julian Sayin's first touchdown drive that he had, because he was going up against the second team defense at that point, and they were just running all over them. I wrote good scoring drive led by Julian, but they feasted on this second team defensive line to the point where like Gabe Van Sickle and guys on the second team O line were looking like all American level players. They were putting some dudes in the dirt like that. I don't know. We'll see how much it matters, right? Because it's like we're talking about how deep this offensive line is. Well, guess what? Depth doesn't matter if your starting 5 isn't very good, right? But it's also like, this defensive line, their starting 4 is going to be really good or whatever they decide to do with it. But if that's what your depth looks like, then you better be playing some 3-4 or at least 3-3-5.
I think they should just run 3-4. It's college football. Your personnel is going to dictate the scheme. It's in the NFL, And I think their personnel dictates that maybe you should run a 3-4. And yes, you still got to add guys in the portal. And again, it opens April 16th is what Doug in our chat is telling us. It opens on April 16th. Is open until the 25th. Thank you, Doug, for that.
Just call the best defensive tackle in the country. Tell him to get in the portal. Whatever.
Yeah, this is the world we live. Listen, man, there's a quarterback who was a starting quarterback for a playoff team last year.
Which, by the way, I don't know where these rumors started, so please do not take this as gospel. But Dan Lanning today had a no comment about reaching out to Nico Iamaleava. Apparently, that's been a rumor, and Dan got asked about it after the spring game. He said the only thing I'm talking about today is Oregon. Okay.
Just to add in about that 3-4 in function, just for clarity, that's probably going to look more like a 3-3-5 just because of the offenses that you're going to see where you have 5 DBs on the field. You probably want 3 corners and 2 safeties on the field. Just in terms of the type of offenses you're probably
that doesn't have to change. You're just taking the 4 from the D end and moving one of them to the back. You can still
that's what I'm saying. I mean, you want
CJ Hicks
a 3-4. You have 4 DBs on the field.
No, you don't. You don't have to.
I mean, 3 and then 4, and then you have 2 corners.
Listen, I'm not going to matter.
Oregon plays with 12 players.
Yeah,
and we call Dan Lanning a genius for that.
Yeah, it's kind of football. There's no rules in college football. You can do whatever you want. Okay. We're going. That's about an hour. We'll dive deep into some of this stuff over the next couple of weeks here. I think Mylan Graham had a really good day as well. He was probably the star of the spring game in terms of skill guys. That's a guy who's pushing for playing time, and maybe you don't just have a top 3 at wide receiver. You've got a little bit more than that. But we'll continue to have these conversations. The spring is officially over. Recruiting is now on the forefront of everybody, and Ohio State seems to be on a bit of a run. Can they continue that run into May and especially into June as we get out to those camps? Andrew will be out there and he'll be bringing all that information. Get the text 614-350-3315. Go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. We'll be going live too. So if you're watching on YouTube, shout out to you. I don't know if this was the cleanest operation, but it was square one. Okay? It was square one. We're not Heisman level with this yet, but bear with us and let us continue
It's
to
spring
develop
practice for everybody. That's what
Yeah,
it is.
you know?
Spring practice for everybody.
We're trying new stuff. But in the meantime, stick with us and get the text 614-350-3315. For Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis, I'm Steven Means, and that was Buckeye Talk. All right.
We're not still
well.
We're not